From the very first day she walked into my life, I could tell she hated me. It wasn't something she ever said out loud. Hatred doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through cold glances, heavy silences, and small acts that slowly break a person from the inside. Hers lived in the way she never called my name, only you. In the way her eyes hardened whenever I entered the room, as if my presence alone was an inconvenience she hadn't asked for. Her name was Laura. She became my stepmother when I was 10 years old. My mother had died 2 years earlier, leaving behind a house that felt too quiet and a father who tried his best but didn't know how to fill the empty spaces. When Laura arrived, everyone told me to be grateful. "She'll take care of you," they said. "She'll be like a mother." But she wasn't. At first, I thought it was my fault. Maybe I reminded her too much of my mother. Maybe I was too quiet, too awkward, too much baggage from a past she wanted erased. I tried everything to make her like me. Keeping my room spotless, bringing her water without being asked, staying silent when she scolded me for no reason. Nothing worked. If I spoke, she told me to stop talking. If I stayed quiet, she accused me of being rude. If something broke, it was my fault. Even when I wasn't home, my father rarely noticed. He worked long hours, and when he was home, Laura smiled sweetly and spoke kindly, transforming into a woman I barely recognized. When I tried to tell him, he would sigh and say, "She's just strict. She means well." But hatred doesn't mean well. As the years passed, her dislike grew sharper. She served food last to me, sometimes forgetting altogether. She compared me constantly to her own son, Mark, who visited on weekends. "Why can't you be more like him?" she would say, even though Mark was older, louder, and never around long enough to see her cruelty. One night, I overheard her talking on the phone. "I never wanted her," Laura said, her voice low and bitter. "She's not my responsibility. She's just there." Just there. Like an unwanted object. That night, I cried into my pillow without making a sound. I learned early that tears only gave her satisfaction. By 16, I stopped trying. I focused on school, buried myself in books, and counted the days until I could leave. Hate has a strange power. It can crush you, or it can quietly forge you into something stronger. I chose strength. When my father fell ill during my final year of high school, everything changed. Laura's patience disappeared completely. She blamed me for the medical bills, for the stress, for everything that went wrong. "Your existence ruined this family," she spat one evening. I didn't reply. For the first time, her words didn't pierce me. They passed through like empty air. After my father died, Laura wasted no time. She handed me a suitcase and said, "You're an adult now. Figure it out." No tears. No goodbye. I left that house with nothing but a few clothes, my certificates, and a heart that had learned how to survive without love. Life outside was hard, harder than I ever imagined. I worked 2 jobs, studied at night, and slept in tiny rented rooms. Some days, loneliness felt heavier than hunger. But slowly, I built a life. I graduated. I found a stable job. I met people who treated me with kindness, without conditions. Years passed. One afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Mark. "Laura is sick," he said. "She keeps asking for you." I laughed softly, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. The woman who hated me now wanted me. When I visited her in the hospital, she looked smaller, weaker, stripped of the sharpness that once defined her. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw me. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I was jealous. You reminded me of a life I never had the courage to face. So, I took it out on you." I listened. I didn't interrupt. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace over poison. I don't hate you, I said calmly, but I won't pretend it didn't hurt. She nodded, understanding at last. When I left the hospital, I felt lighter. Not because she apologized, but because I no longer carried her hatred inside me. She hated me, but she didn't break me. And that was my quiet victory. I thought leaving her behind would erase the past. I was wrong. Even after building a new life, even after years of silence, Laura's voice still lived somewhere deep inside me, criticizing, doubting, reminding me of everything she once said I was not. Hatred has a way of echoing long after the person who caused it fades from your daily life. After visiting her in the hospital, I tried to return to my routine. Work, home, sleep, repeat. But something inside me had shifted. Seeing her weak, apologetic, and afraid had reopened doors I had locked for years. At night, memories returned uninvited. Her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me clean the kitchen again because I missed a spot. Her telling relatives how difficult I was, while smiling proudly at Mark. Her silence on my birthdays, as if acknowledging my existence would cost her something. I used to think surviving meant becoming cold. But survival, I learned, is learning how to feel without letting pain control you. A week later, Mark called again. She doesn't have much time, he said quietly. She keeps saying she wants to fix things. Fix things. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be understood. I visited her again. This time, the room smelled of medicine and regret. She looked at me the way she never had before, not with anger or irritation, but fear. I was cruel, she said, and I knew it. I just didn't stop. I asked her a question I had carried since childhood. Why me? She closed her eyes. Because you were strong, she whispered. And because you were proof that love existed before me. I felt like an outsider in my own house, so I made you feel like one too. Her honesty didn't heal the past, but it softened its sharpest edges. I don't need you to love me, I said. I needed you not to hate me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I know, she replied. And I'm sorry I learned that too late. When she passed away a month later, I didn't cry the way people expected me to. I felt something quieter, closure. A chapter finally ending without unfinished sentences. At the small funeral, relatives spoke kindly of her. I stayed silent. My truth didn't need an audience. That evening, standing alone under the fading sky, I realized something important. Her hatred had shaped me, but it did not define me. I was more than the child she rejected. I was someone who had survived neglect, grown through pain, and chosen not to pass that bitterness forward. I went home, looked at my reflection, and smiled for the first time without hesitation. She hated me, but I learned how to love myself. And that was the beginning of a life she could never control. After Laura's death, life didn't suddenly become peaceful or perfect. Healing is not a single moment. It's a slow, uneven road with days that feel light and nights that feel unbearably heavy. Some mornings I woke up feeling free, as if a shadow had finally lifted. Other nights, I dreamed of that old house, of footsteps in the hallway, of a voice calling me useless in a whisper sharp enough to cut. But something was different now. The voice no longer ruled me. I began therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand myself. For years, I had lived in survival mode, constantly trying to prove my worth. I worked harder than necessary, apologized too often, and accepted less than I deserved, all because a part of me still believed Laura was right. Hatred, I learned, doesn't just hurt in the moment. It quietly teaches you lies about who you are. One evening, While sorting through old papers, I found a childhood photo. I was smiling, standing beside my mother, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. I stared at that picture for a long time. That child wasn't weak. That child wasn't a burden. That child deserved love. And so did I. Months later, I was offered a promotion at work. For the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. I accepted it with confidence, not fear. I moved into a brighter apartment, filled it with plants, books, and silence that felt safe instead of lonely. Then something unexpected happened. I fell in love. Not the desperate kind that clings for validation, but a quiet, steady love built on respect. When I told him about my past, about Laura, about the years of hatred, he listened without trying to fix me. "You didn't deserve any of that," he said simply. Those words healed parts of me I didn't know were still bleeding. Years later, I stood in front of a small group of children at a community center, volunteering as a mentor. One girl reminded me painfully of myself, quiet, careful, always apologizing for existing. I knelt beside her and said, "You don't have to earn kindness. You already deserve it." As I said those words, I realized they were meant for me too. Laura hated me, but her hatred did not become my legacy. I chose a different ending. I chose to break the cycle, to turn pain into empathy, silence into strength, and rejection into self-respect. My life was no longer a reaction to her cruelty. It was a reflection of my resilience. Some people enter our lives to love us. Others enter to teach us how strong we are. She hated me, but I survived. I healed, and I finally learned how to live.